I want to show you why Shaboozie's A Bar Song is in fact the perfect song to teach you R&B chords and harmony. And if you don't believe me, just listen to this.
Someone pour me up a double shot of whiskey. They know me and Jack Daniels got a history. There's a party downtown near
to get there, we need to start here at the first part of the lesson. Basic triads, everyone's favorite, right? But no, really, we have to start here in order for us to, you know, take baby steps, then more advanced steps, and then eventually arrive at what you heard in the intro. Now I'm using my skills here because obviously this song is on the guitar, but the chord progression is perfect for us to get into some secondary dominance, some chord substitution, some extensions, all of the fun stuff, you know, that you think about 24/7, right? Now I thought about editing this really cleverly and, you know, making it all transition into each other and there being no silence or no pauses, but honestly the best way I can present this information to you is by slowing it down and going bit by bit. But just stick with me because I promise you, you're going to learn loads today and you're going to increase your weaponry, your arsenal. Because I always say, if you understand what you're actually doing, then, you know, you can do anything. You can break the rules, you can stick to the rules, whatever you want to do, the choice is yours. Right, we should think about this song in A major. We are essentially going from the 6th chord, which is an F sharp minor chord, to the 1 chord, which is an A major chord. Then we're going to the 4 chord, which is a D major chord, and then we're doing a little kind of turnaround, and we're essentially going from an A chord to an E chord, which is a 4/5 movement, and they're just strummed out. So our aim is to take these triads, which just means 3-note chords, to another level, and then maybe take some of them out and substitute them with some different chords. And I like to see this all as a journey, and there's, you know, thousands of ways that you can get from point A to B, and I'm just going to show you a couple of ways you could think about maybe taking that journey. I love this track as it is. It sounds fantastic. I'm just merely doing this to, again, illustrate to you that anything is possible, and with a couple of moves and how to understand how to make those moves, you can achieve something beautiful or something R&B-ish. Our first step is just to move some of the notes around in these chords to make them sound a little bit more like a pianist would play them, rather than just MIDI, blocks of MIDI. I see these as just like literally the notes themselves. Stage 1, kindergarten. So let's start building. I kind of like where this voicing is here. Let's see if we move this top note E down, how that kind of ends up sounding. I already like that more than the voicing before, and you guessed it, we're going to take these 2 notes, and all I'm doing here, I'm just using different inversions of these chords, and all that means is basically shuffling the notes within the chord around. And you don't have to understand exactly what inversions you're playing here, but what I'm looking for is that the notes are as kind of close to each other as possible, because in my opinion, they tend to work really nicely when notes are close together. You see there's like this common tone, and I'm looking at the movement of each voice within the chord to kind of create something that's called like voice leading, which is, you know, a more advanced kind of technique, but the way that you can understand it is just by what I said, just trying to make the notes kind of each note move nicely and not too far from each other. Now this already looks like it's pretty good in its position wise, and this is obviously our A major chord again, but let's see what happens if we do this. We're back to that initial voice in there, and whenever I move chords around like this, it kind of gives me a churchy type feel, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just, if you played in church a lot when you were a kid, this will kind of take you back to that. Next we're going to add some bass notes to these chords to thicken them out a little bit, and you're going to see something interesting with this E chord here, and it's going to really illustrate what I mean by the power of inversions when we get to there. So that's still to come, so stay tuned for that. Let's try the whole progression now. That sounds a lot more cohesive than what we had in the beginning. It sounds more as if a piano player would have played something like that. The next thing I want to look at is just dropping in the bass note into these chords here, and you're going to find something interesting when we get to these two chords. And now you think that this was an E here, right? If we're following the pattern of what we did before. And that would be fine. However, what they are doing in the song itself is very nice. They are just using a first inversion bass note on this chord, the G sharp, which is the second note in the E major chord. So let's listen to how this progression sounds now. And with that, we're kind of arrived at where the progression sits on the record, and that sounds great in itself, but it's still quite far away from what I played you in the beginning. How do we get from here to what I played you in the beginning? Well, so the first thing we can do is maybe add a few extensions to a couple of these chords just to make them a little bit more colourful, more flavour to them, you know. And I always like to add extensions when I'm thinking about R&B, because that kind of gives it the signature sound. And the easy way to find the minor seventh of any minor chord is to take our root note, drop it down by 2 notes, raise it up an octave, and now we have a F sharp minor 7th chord. A little bit more colourful there, and we can also add the 9th to this as well. And if we wanted to find the 9th, we could do the same move but go up. So if we add this G sharp in, take it up an octave, and we have that nice sort of dissonant clash between these two notes, which again, when in the context of the whole chord, sounds really beautiful. So in a really interesting way of playing it, which we might not have even thought of if we didn't build it like that. You know, if we didn't start at phase 1 building that kind of inversion. You can do something like this where we just make it a little bit more natural, pianistic, I think is the word, where we just sort of strum out the notes a little bit. In FL, this is really easy to do. In Logic, you can do it with a strum feature, but it never kind of achieves what I want. I like to just go in and do this manually, just, you know. Now, what can we do on this second chord here? This chord is really interesting to me because although it's an A chord and it is the 1 chord of A major, and you could just think of it as a 1 chord, to me it is operating as what we call a secondary dominant chord that is a tension chord that pulls us to our destination chord. Today is all about journey, destination, and getting somewhere. And when I say getting somewhere, we're trying to kind of push ourselves to the following chord. So I see this as a journey chord or a movement chord, a tension chord that's pulling us to this D chord. In secondary dominance, it basically is the 5 chord of a new 1 chord, temporary 1 chord being this D. And with that being said, we get license to change this chord from a straight major chord to a dominant chord, because traditionally dominant chords can be used to pull towards a destination chord. So it's acting as a 5 of this temporary 1 chord here, and saying that we can actually turn this A major triad into a dominant chord. Again, easy way to make this a dominant chord. Go for your root, do exactly the same thing with the minor 7th chord that we did, just drop 2 notes and raise it up. Now, why does that work? Because this is a major triad, not a minor triad. So it's not a minor 7th now, it's known as a dominant 7th. So have a listen to these 2 chords now. Oh yeah, we're getting some nice tense kind of clashy coloration going on here, and this strumming's not perfect. As you can see, I just adjust stuff on the fly here, right? So already like sounding a bit more majestic, a bit more like we're going somewhere here. We're getting somewhere, but this is still quite vanilla sounding chord. What can we do to maybe spice it up? You heard that in the beginning there was actually I split this into like 2 different chords to really ramp up the tension to get to this D chord. We'll get there in a minute. Let's just work on, you know, the rest of these chords, just kind of raising them up a level first, and then we'll kind of come back and we'll maybe slice them up a little bit and show you what else you can do. So now this D chord, we can make this a D major 7th or a D major 9 as well. Usually you can just add a major 7th or a major 9th kind of extensions to a chord, like a major chord in a diatonic scale. This is just a 4 chord. So if we take the note directly underneath the root, we move it up an octave, we have a major 7th chord. Let's see how that sounds. Oh, it's not really sitting well for me after that dominant chord that we just made. This sort of sounds a bit, it's kind of irking me. Let's maybe try and raise up this C sharp by an octave and see how that kind of works. I mean, it's still, the rub there between these 2 notes is not pleasing. I'm thinking, right, the thing I love about chords is when the top note is like common to all chords. What if we just either drop this now down an octave and see how that sounds? Oh, that's a lot better. What about if we even took that out entirely? Oh, that to me is really nice. See, what I'm showing you here is like there's no rules really. It's just about what your ear kind of thinks works the best. And if I were to bring in the vocals now, we're already getting a lot more harmony kind of colours that are going to be brought out here. You know, ignore my singing, it's terrible. So these 2 chords here now, the way that I want to approach these is actually a good transition into maybe the first sort of substitutions that we're going to look at, because honestly, to me, these 2 chords are journey chords that want to bring us back to this F sharp. So they're merely acting as like, they're kind of acting like a 2-5-1. That's how I see them, which is this being a 2 chord, this being a 5 chord, and this being a 1 chord. And we can use what we know about minor 2-5-1s. When I say minor 2-5-1, it's because our destination is a minor chord, and we can just kind of get rid of these completely, and we can put in some colourful chords that we know will work in a minor 2-5-1, and that being a kind of a half diminished chord first, then an altered dominant chord, just like we did here with this dominant chord to lead us to this major. We can use an altered dominant chord to lead us to this minor chord, well, back to this kind of minor 9 chord here, and we can build this first half diminished chord quite easily as like a minor 7 chord with a flat 5 in it. And what would be the 2 chord of F sharp? It would be a G sharp or an A flat. So let's build this minor 7th from scratch. First thing we can do is put in the minor 7th. We know how to do that. So raise that up an octave there, and we've got a minor 7th interval, right? We want a flat 3rd, so if we know that that is a flat 3rd, and we want a 5th to start with. So there is a minor 7th chord, however, it's not the voicing we want. If we now take the D sharp, which is the 5th, flatten it by 1 degree, and we know that this chord is going to be half the length because we got a 2-5-1. Check this out. Now, this is not the voicing we want, but the chord quality is there. Let's try moving some of the notes around. If we move these 2 notes around, how does it sound now? So, oh, there you go. instant colour, instant spice, instant R&B. Instant R&B, that sounds like a soup. And if you like some of these concepts, book a one-to-one with me. We can go over anything you want in depth. Just hit me up on Instagram at Beastix Production and cop a free mini kit. The link is in the description. There's many more mini kits that are on the way, and full kits and all kinds of goodies. We've made our 2 chord. We need a 5 chord now. So let's build like a altered dominant chord off of the 5 of F sharp. That would just be some kind of C sharp altered dominant chord. So if we put the root note in now, so how do we build the dominant chord? You remember that we're going to need to take what was before. We take a note that it's like how we made the minor seventh, but we're going to just shove it there, and we're going to put the third in, which is going to be a. So that is a standard dominant chord. If we now take the ninth, which again raise that up by 2, put the ninth up there, we've got that's just a C9 chord. If we want to alter it, we just take the 9 and we flatten or sharpen it. What if we sharpen it? How does that sound? Oh, that already sounds really nice. And remember, we're not going to be going into this F sharp, we're going to be going into this F sharp. So if we just loop that section around, we'll kind of get an idea of how that will sound as a whole progression. Beautiful, right? Already that is, you know, perfect for R&B, and we can go even further. So there's literally a million possibilities here. You know, there's all different cars we could get into. It's like GTA or something. First time I've heard like this being compared to GTA. But anyway, if we take these first 2 bars, and this will be the second time the progression comes around, watch what we can do. We could do this really kind of common trick that you hear loads in these R&B records. So I'm taking the first chord, which is that F sharp minor 9 chord, right? And we're gonna make it half as long as it was originally. We're going to double it, and we're just going to drop it down by a semitone. And this is like a chromatic walk down to our 2 chord, which is going to be the next chord that we hit here in the 2-5-1. So we're going D, da, 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 with our destination chord being this D again. Okay, so we've got F sharp, F, we're going to have E here, and it's going to be the same chord again. Let's get rid of this chord here, we need some space. Let's take this and let's drop this down to the E here, and now we've actually got an E chord, which is the 2 chord of this chord, the D. So 2, we're playing this minor 9 chord as our 2 chord. We've got this dominant chord, remember, as our 5 chord, and then we've got this. So if we listen to how this sounds, and you probably heard that a million times in various R&B tracks over the years. And again, if this was on an EP or a synth, it would sound totally different. In fact, there's a million things you can do with these. We'll stick with this EP sound for now. Look, you can take some notes out if you think, not sure about that. You can experiment, watch. Sounds beautiful. You could add a top line melody in. Check this out. You know, or you could just leave it as is, because remember, you're going to have the song on top as well that's going to take care of that kind of area of the melody. It's totally up to you, no rules, but you get the idea. And one last thing I want to look at here is the bass line, because I find like a lot of people are asking me about bass lines and how do you come up with them. So I just want to take you through a few steps, and again, if you want to know any more, book a one-to-one with me. Like, I've got chordal information for days. I can talk about inversions, I can talk about extensions and all of that geeky autistic stuff, but you know, we love it, right? So just hit me up and let's look at some bass stuff. Again, as if by magic, here is our bass line, and this is what you heard in the beginning of the video. I'm thinking about rhythm, I'm thinking about keeping it interesting. I'm also thinking about movement, because the chords are quite static, so there's an opportunity there for me to move the bass line around quite a lot. Again, the drums are just going to be like, you know, typical kind of trap drums or R&B trap soul drums, and the bass has license to move around as I'm doing here. But although this may look difficult, if you approach it in a way that's kind of piece by piece, you can create bass lines just like this, or even, you know, more or technical if you really want. But all I'm doing is firstly drawing root notes where you've got all your chord changes, and then between certain notes I'm just either walking up chromatically, that being here, that's a chromatic walk up there. And by the way, this bass sound is just in Mini Monster. The preset is called Funk All Rounder in Mini Monster 2. And a lot of the times I think about my bass lines as being hooky as well, melodic. So I sing my bass lines out, and there's an opportunity between chords to add some tension in and just walk down scales. Like I'm just thinking about like the F sharp minor pentatonic scale. Go check it out if you don't know it. And any kind of whatever key you're in, like the minor pentatonic is a good rule of thumb to be able to just like play any notes that you want from that scale, and they'll sound good in certain parts of the bass line. So my bass line is all about like tension and release. Boom, do 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 do. This is just something I can just do after years of studying bass lines and seeing how they move around. Also, you can pick chord tones from the chord above, and any of the notes that are in the chord will kind of work as like moving bass notes. I wouldn't suggest maybe moving the bass note around for like the initial first note of the bass as soon as that chord hits, but like once it's hit, you can kind of move to other notes within that chord as an interesting kind of bass fill or movement. So as the progression goes along, you've got that chromatic walk down we spoke about, and then you've got that 2 chord, and on the 5 chord I'm just doing this D and I'm doing this E again, which is, you know, as we said, like the E is within the chord, but it's also a tone away from the D, and you can approach any note by using a note that's a tone away from it. For example, like this. I'm just thinking rhythmically here. Now I could do a whole lesson about this if you want, but I just wanted to kind of illustrate to you a cool way, a few little techniques. I'm changing the rhythm of the bass line up there, which is again something I really enjoy to do, that live bass players do all the time. And then I'm changing the rhythm to more of a 16th note pattern here, instead of our contrasting that with the longer held out notes that we might have like at bar 98, you know. Again, just bouncing around chord tones here and ending with this fill that is like an octave up. And this is a good rule for 808s as well. Drill music, you can do this kind of thing too, where like I'm jumping up a whole octave to play that little fill there. And look, if there's any other kind of questions you have regarding bass lines, hit me up in the DMs on Instagram. I'm always ready to answer. So thanks guys. If you want to know more, as I said, grab a 1-to-1. But yeah, check the video in the top corner for some more source, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.